morning to you, and of course, let's get into around the world news for this particular morning. All right, kickstarting off things with news from across the globe. First things we dive into Russia stands with Ukraine's Orthodox community, protect their legal rights. FM Lavrov. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov promised that Russia will continue to protect the rights of believers in Ukraine and oppose pressure on the Orthodox Church during a speech at a reception to mark Orthodox Easter last month in Moscow on Tuesday. Says, I wish to assure all those present that Russia will not abandon the Orthodox people of Ukraine in their difficulties and will ensure that their legitimate rights are upheld and that canonical Orthodoxy regains its rightful place at the center of spiritual life in Ukraine lands, Lavrov noted. The footage shows Patriarch Kirill of Moscow and all Russia presenting a high-ranking diplomat with the Order of Alexander Nevsky, after which the head of the Russian Orthodox Church was photographed with the politicians. The diplomat also noted that Russia aimed to achieve a fair settlement.
Поразительно, с какой легкостью на Западе не замечают многие преступления в самых разных частях света, если эти преступления не мешают Западу продвигать свою глобальную повестку в целях цепляться за ускользающее доминирование.
All right, so the diplomat also noted that Russia aimed to achieve a fair settlement for the Ukrainian crisis, a position confirmed by President Vladimir Putin in a phone conversation with U.S. leader Donald Trump on Monday. Now, in turn, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church claimed that the authorities in Kyiv use all means to justify the law banning the church abroad. Articles tailored to Western audiences are published in reputable journals. Ukrainian religious leaders have organized tours to the United States and Europe, during which they falsely claim that Ukraine is a nation of religious freedom and that there is no persecution here. However, the effectiveness of this propaganda is questionable. International human rights advocacy poses challenges for the Ukrainian authorities, hindering their efforts to completely eradicate orthodoxy within the country. Patrick added, now the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is a self-governing church within the Moscow Patriarchate. After the start of Russia's military offensive in Ukraine, the UOC declared its complete independence, including from the Russian Orthodox Church. Now, in 2018, the Kyiv-backed Orthodox Church of Ukraine was created, with Ukraine attempting to transfer parishes affiliated with the UOC into jurisdiction. Now, the Russian Orthodox Church and the UOC do not recognize the canonical status of that new group. Since 2022, the Security Service of Ukraine has opened more than 100 criminal cases against priests of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, with 26 people sentenced on unspecified charges. Would be great to meet in Vatican or Rome. Trump on a venue for ceasefire talks. U.S. President Donald Trump said holding Russia-Ukraine talks at the Vatican could be a great idea and help things along, while talking to journalists on Monday following a 2-hour phone call with President Putin. I think it would be a great idea to have it at the Vatican. Maybe it would have some extra significance. And I saw that it was discussed yesterday. So I thought, and people told me that they would be honored to do it. Said Trump, adding that having it at the Vatican or in Rome would be a great idea. U.S. President Donald Trump held a phone conversation with Russian leader Vladimir Putin on Monday. Following the call, which lasted for 2 hours, Trump commented that the talks were very well, and that Putin said that the sides were ready to work on a memorandum for a future potential peace treaty following appropriate agreements. Now, Russia and Ukraine held their first direct talks in 2 years in Istanbul on Friday.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned that the Pope would like to take a role potentially in mediating these talks. Does that mean that the U.S. is taking a step back from...
No. I think it would be great to have it at the Vatican. Maybe it would have some extra significance. and I saw that it was discussed yesterday, so I thought, and people told me that they'd be honored to do it. I would imagine they would be. So, no, I think it would be maybe helpful. There's tremendous bitterness, anger, and I think maybe that could help some of that anger. So having it at the Vatican would be, in Rome, would be I think it would be a great idea. Thank you.
Mr. President, as you know,
Can I say-
Go ahead.
Mr. President, as you know, 2.5 months ago, Ukraine President Zelensky agreed to that 30-day ceasefire that's been on the table all of that time. What was the extent of your conversation with President Putin today about having him agree to that same 30-day ceasefire proposal that you, Mr. President, put on the table?
Well, what we've done, and very strongly, is we said, let's get this thing going. You know, I had many of the leaders of European nations on the line with me right after the call, and we have to get that thing solved. 5,000 young people every single week on average. And I've seen satellite pictures. You don't want to see these pictures. We'll have to see what happens. This was not my war. This is not a war that would have happened if I were president. This is not my war. I'm just here to try and help. We've spent hundreds of billions of dollars on this war, and yet that's not, frankly, we made much more than that just in 4 days in the Middle East. It's a lot of money, but we do much. This is about thousands of people dying every single week. 5,000, 6,000 people dying every single week. And just like you have the relatives here, wives and children and everything, you have, these soldiers, they say goodbye in Ukraine and in Russia, and then their parents never see them again, except maybe in pictures of horrible scenes, because I've seen some scenes, I've never seen anything like it. So we're going to see if we can get it taken care of. Yeah, please.
Agent Orange and Agent Blue, the Vietnam War, and why America's dirty legacy is here to stay. Full focus, the United States' use of chemical agents during the Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975. And the legacy is well documented. Agent Orange has been linked to cancers, birth defects, and many other illnesses. But now, some of the other little known rainbow herbicides, notably Agent Blue, are coming to light, along with an even worse long-term impact and deadly consequences. Now, 50 years on from the end of the conflict, this full-focus investigation talks to those living with the effects, as well as experts in history and soil science, to explore how a very murky period of history is casting a dark shadow over modern-day Vietnam. Dr. Pan Duan Dang is a Vietnamese researcher specializing in chemical warfare victims for the past decade. He explained why and how the U.S. even considered using such agents in the first place. Now, the United States conducted an operation called Operation Ranch Hand in 1962 to 1971. This was a defoliation program, essentially to destroy the forest, to deny Vietnamese forces of forest cover, but also food supplies. He said, and the United States sprayed several herbicides, and they have different code names depending on the storage. An estimated 80 million liters of Agent Orange was sprayed over South Vietnam as the U.S. battled with North Vietnam's communist government forces and allies. Now, so famously, you have Agent Orange because it was sorted in orange barrels, but then you also have other herbicides like Agent Blue, Agent White, and Pink. He added, well, people have talked a lot about Agent Orange because it is the most sprayed herbicide and it contains a highly toxic chemical substance called dioxin. Dioxin was a contaminant in the herbicide linked to cancers, diabetes, and birth defects. Footage features second and third generation victims. Agent Orange has a video of sweeping Central Valleys and the Mekong Delta, where some wartime guerrilla tunnels, which the U.S. was targeting at the time, remain intact. Nguyen Viet Nam is a former Vietnam soldier who came into contact with Agent Orange in 1962. At that time, the U.S. sprayed a lot of toxic chemicals, sprayed them like showers, and when we caught in the rain, we just take a bath. We don't know anything. We didn't know until peace came about 10 years later. Then I got married and had children. Fortunately, my first two children were normal. Only the third one was affected. This year, she is 43 years old, he said. Vietnam estimates that several million were affected, including around 150,000 children with birth defects. The U.S. does compensate its own wartime veterans to related health issues, but not Vietnamese survivors. Agent Orange might be best known, but it's by no means the full story or even biggest problem. Professor Kenneth R. Olson, one of the world's most prominent soil scientists based at the University of Illinois, has spent his life dedicated to researching and raising awareness, specifically of Agent Blue, arguably even more dangerous due to its long-lasting defects. I discovered in my research that Agent Blue was totally different than the other 5 rainbow herbicides. It didn't contain dioxin, which is a contaminant in purple and orange. It had arsenic instead, and the problem with arsenic is it's an element and it doesn't have a half-life, he said, meaning that it won't decay over time and will remain forever. There already is arsenic naturally in the groundwater, and I know that we added 2 million pounds of arsenic, and it's water soluble. It goes into the groundwater, he explained. After 1975, they built or dug 700,000 tube wells. What was the purpose? To bring the groundwater to the surface? For what? Shrimp ponds? That's a food supply. Rice paddies, household needs, and drinking water for 15 million people. Now, arsenic buildup in the body and long-term exposure can lead to cancer, skin lesions, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes, among others. Dr. Pan Swan Dang reiterated that it was still a major issue, that it had never been fully acknowledged. It remains in the soil and the water. It is making people sick in Vietnam. However, because Agent Orange is still the focus in the United States, has not acknowledged that Agent Blue is a problem that needs to be addressed, so we don't have currently a program to deal with arsenic like we have the program to deal with dioxin, he said. Also, now suggested the story, Agent Blue had been suppressed with no studies or data on the number of people who have been affected specifically, but the use of it, Agent Orange, and the others could even be considered a war crime. We in the U.S. always insisted on talking about defoliation, Agent Orange, and we never talked about Agent Blue, and only a very few stories ever emerged about Agent Blue during the war itself, and so there was so concern by the administration that it could be a war crime if you starve the civilian population. So there is a lot of reasons to be cautious. This could be interrupted as a chemical weapon. We always insisted it was a herbicide, not a farmer's herbicide. It wasn't chemical weapon. It wasn't chemical weapon. However, herbicide is a chemical, and it was used up on the vegetation and troops, he said. Now, the U.S. has never officially apologized for its use of the chemical, which Pan Suan Dang said he believed was due to the political consequences. The U.S. government has focused efforts on bilateral humanitarian assistance, working with Vietnam in terms of the cleanup for Agent Orange in particular, and launching a nearly $200 million 10-year program in 2019 run by USAID and Aid Development Agency. However, Pan Suan Dang warned that with the domestic focus, Trump administration today and its huge cuts to USAID, even the efforts made by the US in more recent years will not be guaranteed in the future.
So during the war in Vietnam, the United States conducted an operation called Operation Ranch Hand. And this is a defoliation program essentially to destroy the forest, to deny Vietnamese forces of forest cover, but also food supplies. And the United States sprayed several herbicides, and they have different code names depending on the storage, the barrel in which they were stored. So famously, you have Agent Orange because it was stored in orange striped barrels. But then you also have other herbicides like Agent Blue, Agent White, Agent Pink. And while we have people have talked a lot about Agent Orange because it is the most sprayed herbicide, and it contains a highly toxic chemical substance called dioxin. And this is the result of the faulty manufacturing of Agent Orange itself. And there have been a lot of research into the effects of Agent Orange. And if you go to Vietnam, you can see that there are many cases of birth defects that have been linked to exposure to dioxin. The herbicides used by the United States during the war have long-lasting consequences for the exposed population in Vietnam. Those directly exposed to dioxin and arsenic can experience harmful health effects and chronic illnesses. For example, cancer, diabetes, blood diseases, and liver failures. And the tragedy with dioxin is that it has an intergenerational impact. So those who are exposed to dioxin have a high rate of giving birth to children with severe cognitive and mobility disabilities. And it is still a very big problem in Vietnam. We have, according to government's estimates, we have thousands of children born after the war with severe disabilities that are linked to dioxin.
Tôi bị nhiễm hồi năm 62 là ở dưới Bến Tre lại, rồi lên đây từ năm 68 ở vùng căn cứ ở Bến Cát nè, An Thành, Bến Cát, Bình Dương á, là bên kia sông Sài Gòn, bên đây là Bình Dược, Củ Chi đó, vùng tam giác sát. Là Mỹ thời gian nó rải dữ lắm, rải mưa như mưa rào đó, rồi kiểu như mình mắc mưa đó, mình tắm á, nhưng mà đâu có biết đâu, dễ phóng.
Right, let's wrap it up with around the world news. Wrestling mania in Burkina Faso. Top champions take center stage for annual championship. Burkina Faso's top wrestlers locked arms and ambitions in Ouagadougou as the nation's flagship wrestling championship drew crowds and showcased emerging talent. Over 130 of the country's premier athletes battled for pride and victory in a sport that holds a treasured place in the hearts of citizens. This year, for the first time, young wrestlers competed alongside adults. One of the major innovations is that the young wrestlers took part at the same time as the adults, which just goes to show how much we value the next generation of wrestlers, said Oseni Kabre, president of the Burkinabe Wrestling Federation. The 29th Burkina Faso Traditional Wrestling Championship was held on Sunday. It saw Kevin Morse, known as El Talon, the Can, the Raging Stallion, and Rihanata Diallo from Nile emerge victorious. My only secret was training, revealed Morse with a smile. Rihanata Diallo added, after this fight, I plan to take part in the Francophone Games or other competitions to win the gold medal. This year's championship, traditional wrestling cultural identity and symbol of national unity, saw licensed wrestling clubs join the competition, which was the country's largest ever. We end around the world news update. Good morning.